within certain finite limits, is not allowed to overplay its bounds. But in a new country, the leader, if he quarrels with another leader, that's very big trouble, because there are no institutions that can mitigate or mute the consequences. And even if there are the institutions, they don't have enough life and don't have a long enough history to have learned and abstracted lessons. Therefore, it is our singular good fortune that President Suharto took over from President Sukarno. Would have been a totally different Southeast Asia had we had a second Sukarno. You just imagine the last 25 years. To the younger generation, when you say Sukarno, they say, oh, so what? Well, I said, a terrific orator. How do I know? Because once I drove up from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur, and it took 6 hours, and I had him on my radio, my car radio, and he spoke for 6 hours. Utter gibberish, incomprehensible. Threw in words, he coined new words, Gane Fo, all kinds, emerging new games. So every day he's got to think of something new to enthuse his population, because he could not feed them. Agriculture was going down the drain, imports were getting short, no foreign exchange. But he had good speeches, and it fired off tremendous enthusiasm. As I listened to all this, I thought to myself, now, one civil servant, our civil servant, summed it up accurately for me. When Sukarno started confrontasi, you see, he needed an issue to galvanize his people, and so that otherwise they'll go for their own government because they haven't got enough food, no jobs, no houses, no roads, repairs, and so on. So he wanted to get Dutch New Guinea, which is now called West Irian. It's part of one empire. Then after several years of agitation, he got it. But see, the Americans weren't wise people. They had their institutional memory is not so long. They thought that, well, we solved the problem. But the problem was he needs a problem. So immediately he mounted confrontasi against Malaysia, because otherwise, what will hold the country together? Right? As Sim Kibun said to me, he ran out of pep pills, you see. So every time when you're short, you're hungry, he says, here, you have a pep pill. So they take a pep pill, they get excited, they feel happy. Great, press on. But he ran out of pep pills, so collapse. Now, we did not believe it at first. But so, as a General Suharto watched all this and decided it was wrong, that Indonesia had all these resources that can be developed, and however run down the infrastructure, it can be repaired and it can be got going. And he has concentrated on this, brought in experts, got his own educated Indonesians with good training abroad into very strong positions. Any one of their top ministers, or any one of their top 4 or 5 in any ministry, are all men of very considerable learning and scholarship, and an understanding of the modern world. But whether, of course, they can implement it and implement it as swiftly as they would like to, that's another matter, because then they run into roadblocks, which they have not completely eliminated. But there is full comprehension of how the modern world economy works and how Indonesia can be brought into this modern economy. I think that changed the history of Southeast Asia. One man, his attitude, his approach, his philosophy of development. He wasn't interested in building an empire. So I did not understand him at first, because when we first met, he explained to me Panchashila. So the first few times I listened to him on Panchashila, I thought, well, this is another one of this Ganefo, you know. But it wasn't. He was serious that it has to do with belief in God, democracy, justice, and amongst other things, development. And that's what he wanted. And because of that, ASEAN has prospered. You look at the other Asian grouping, SAARC, S-A-A-R-C, South Asian Association of Regional Conference. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, several others. I don't know, Bhutan? Maldives, yes. This year, India and Pakistan very nearly went to war. Still may, over Kashmir. Last year, trouble with Nepal. I mean, the Nepalese took action against, or did not give the Indians the kind of special treatment which they expected for allowing Nepalese goods to pass through Indian territory, and suddenly no more passage of goods through Indian territory, no petrol, no other essential goods. A few years before that, Sri Lanka was in trouble. It could have been our fate. So it is a matter of supreme importance to us how the succession in Indonesia takes place. Because when President Suharto steps down, it will be only the second time that Indonesia has changed presidents. They've had only two presidents, Sukarno and Suharto. And the last time, 25 years ago, again, a younger generation has no such memories. There was a bloody attempted coup in which 6 Indonesian generals were murdered or assassinated, and there was a bloodbath in which many, many thousands died. And Indonesia was saved from going communist by the intervention of what they call Kostrad, a strategic brigade. And the general in charge of Kostrad was one called General Suharto. So the next year, 1966, he became president when President Sukarno resigned. Now, it is important, after all these 25 years of building up the economy and building up the institutions in Indonesia, the institutions of state, that the succession to the president in Indonesia is in accordance with the Constitution. And it is a constitutional succession. Otherwise, the great advances made in this 25 years may well be thrown away. And it is one of the toughest jobs, one of the toughest leadership jobs in the world. They have 13,000 different islands, big islands. Communications, because they were islands, they had developed separately. And it is only now, after 1949, 45 till now, just 45 years of Bahasa, that the younger generation can understand one language. And to achieve that, the Javanese, who have the most superior language, gave up their own language and took up Bahasa as the national language. Now, we must hope that President Suharto's successor will uphold Indonesia's well-established and institutionalized policies based on Pancasila, which is not a slogan, as I have told you. I thought at first it was a slogan. I was wrong. And Pancasila, the attitudes that go with it, has been good for cooperation in ASEAN. I am encouraged because I see the younger generation leaders on both sides get on very well. And there are no hang-ups over confrontation. I think the ties will grow wider and stronger because there will be more investments, there will be cooperation between our PSA, and there are many harbors. They have come to ask PSA to give some technical help to get their harbors going, their ports. There are some 40 over ports, and they want to upgrade them. And they say, quite frankly, we want a link with PSA, because that way, faster export for their products. Then there'll be cooperation in gas, in water, and of course, increasing cooperation in defense, joint training exercises. The strategy of the Goh Chok Tong team is to use the time that President Suharto gives them, one, to consolidate and deepen our ties, and two, to strengthen and establish these common economic projects like the Singapore-Riau Johor Cooperation Scheme, because that means whoever succeeds President Suharto will be able to see the value of continuing the cooperative Indonesia-Singapore relationship. Of course, I don't want to belabor this point with Singaporeans, but please remember the first 10 years is all favorable, pluses. But into the second 10 years, Johor and then the Riau group can catch up. The infrastructure will be in place. Because they have used us, the time for catching up is reduced, and we have to increase our technical capacity. In other words, stay competitive, which means more and better trained technicians, more and better trained engineers, better management, higher productivity. No other black box that can produce first prizes for us. The first prize that we win, any first prize in any magazine, that ranking, that rating, is the result of many years of hard work. It also means anticipating changes. For instance, it is quite obvious now that the German economy is going to be the strongest in Europe. It's also going to be one of the technologically most advanced in the world, not just in Europe, which means we take the learning of German seriously. We have sent students there, but you know, the Singapore student, he calculates, he says, well, I go there, I have to spend 1.5 years, several months here, unless he's done it in school, he learns the basics of the language. Then he goes there and he learns 1 year of the language. Then he spends 4, 5, 6 years to get some doctorandus or something like a PhD. And he comes back, and the PSC does not recognize all this and says, all right, you're a graduate, here you are, that's the starting point. So he's put in all these years, so he says, well, what's in it for me? So he tells his cousins and his younger brothers, and next time, less qualified candidates apply for that scholarship. So I think we need to make adjustments. And I'm glad to say that the PSC has been quick off the mark and putting things right. Not just for the future, but also any injustices or oversights of the past. It also means we send good students to Japan, which fortunately we've been able to do. But then these were Chinese educated students with command of the Chinese language. But now we are all CL2 students. So again, the problem will mount. And we got to give due recognition to the years they spend there and the different system.